I settled into the back seat, laughing softly. It felt strange, but I decided not to ask questions. After all, it was just a drive. Maybe he had prepared a surprise? The car moved smoothly. I watched the scenery outside the window, but I couldn't shake the strange feeling creeping in. Something was off. He was silent. Usually, he would tell me something, laugh, make comments about the road or other drivers, but today, absolute silence. I leaned forward. "Where are we going?" He glanced at me through the mirror but said nothing. My chest felt heavy. Something inside me whispered that this trip was far from ordinary. I looked at his hands, they were gripping the steering wheel too tightly. "You're acting strange," I tried to smile, but my voice sounded tense. Again, he looked at me through the mirror. His gaze was studying me. I suddenly wanted to get out. Just open the door and leave, but the car kept moving. We turned off the main road, and for the first time, I felt real fear. I'll take a short pause. Write in the comments where you're listening from. Have you ever experienced something similar? What would you do in my place? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And of course, if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Now, let's continue. The car stopped. I could barely breathe. I knew this place. Narrow streets, old buildings with peeling paint, small cafes around the corner. She lived here. The woman whose name was never supposed to be spoken in our home. At that moment, I didn't want to believe my own eyes. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe we were here for another reason. But as soon as the door opened, all my hopes collapsed. She got into the car confidently, as if she had done it hundreds of times before. I saw her reflection in the mirror, a familiar face, too familiar. But now, her eyes were on me. For a second, there was absolute silence. I felt something uncontrollable rise inside me. Anger. Pain. The feeling of the ground slipping away beneath my feet. Everything I believed was real turned out to be an illusion. How long had this been going on? How many times had she sat in this seat? How many nights had I fallen asleep, unaware that he was here instead? But the worst part, I didn't ask those questions out loud. Not because I was afraid of the answer. But because the answer was obvious. I turned to look at him. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He wouldn't meet my gaze. Neither would she. The air in the car became so thick with tension, it was suffocating. I should have said something. I should have done something. But instead, I just sat there, staring ahead. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than any words. I expected anything. Yelling. Tears. Maybe even a scene. But what happened next changed everything. I looked at her. She looked at me. And suddenly, I understood. Her eyes spoke louder than words, she didn't know the full truth either. This was just as much of a shock for her as it was for me. For a brief moment, something shifted. A silent understanding passed between us. We were both victims of the same lie. Everything changed in that instant. I turned to him. So did she. He felt it. His hands, which had been gripping the steering wheel tightly, trembled slightly. Now he knew, this was completely out of his control. Do you even realize what you've just done? My own calmness startled me. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had trapped himself, and now there was no way out. And then something happened that no one expected. I smiled. She did too. And then, we both started laughing. Not nervously. Not out of weakness. No. It was real, honest laughter. Bitter. Liberating. I saw his face turn pale. He had no idea what was happening, and that was the most satisfying part of the entire day. We exchanged glances, and suddenly, I wasn't even angry anymore. Because now, this wasn't my problem. I grabbed my bag, opened the car door, and stepped out. She did the same. We didn't say a word to each other, just exchanged a knowing nod. We weren't friends. But in that moment, we were allies. And he sat there, behind the wheel, realizing he had just lost us both. What do you think about this story? Have you ever experienced something similar? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is very important to me. I read every comment and truly appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like so you don't miss the next thrilling stories. And if you've listened until the end, write in the comments. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. Wishing you a great day and only pleasant surprises.